Hi, I'm back. I haven't uploaded in a while, and I apologize for that. I plan on making more videos. I have quite a few in the works. I've had quite a few in the works, but have just not gotten around to editing and or writing them. So please like and subscribe for more stuff, and hope you enjoy the video. Thank you, and bye. So let's begin with establishing the question. Does Netflix work as a gaming service? And if all you wanted was the answer to that question and didn't want to watch the rest of this, here you go. It doesn't actually work as a gaming service. At the same time, there's the notion of some potential there. However, let's get into the longer video on this and kind of break down some of the games and how I found their features. I chose 5 particular games to do this with, and well, 40% of them didn't work properly, so let's establish that the 5 games we're getting into are Into the Breach, Immortality, Reigns 3 Kingdoms, Before Your Eyes, and Kentucky Route Zero. Now, there are other apps, but these 5 seem to be the highest contenders for best quality in my opinion. I'll go into the reviews of some of the others as they are also quite up there. Some history for context though, Netflix launched its attempt at a gaming service in November 2021, so it's been out for roughly 17 months. Going into this, I knew they had an app service and was prepared to compare and contrast the app and the browser or home console system effectively. Turns out there are no PC versions of the games, or console versions as far as I can tell. For that matter, it's interesting to say the least. So if you want to enter the game market, sure, apps take about 50% of the possible market. It's a real statistic I found was around 69%, but I'm not sure how reliable that is, so I'm just saying 50 is pretty good. They play some form of mobile app game, which is a huge market to say the least. The second largest market, however, is PC and computer games. By all accounts, it's the second largest market, and Netflix didn't account for that, it seems, or just isn't accounting for it yet, I think. I wouldn't mind if half the games on their current selection were to have a PC component to them. Most interesting is that most of the games are just mobile ports of originally PC games, so I'm not sure why there isn't a PC port of them. It's not 100% a Game Pass system also. I don't know how it'd work if they actually attempted to do it. It looks like they're working with Cloud Tech to do that. Anyway, continuing on, the App Store looks like this. I'm pretty sure you can download the games even if you don't have Netflix. You just need to actually, play the games with it. None feel like unreasonable download sizes in my opinion, with the exception of Immortality. However, it makes sense given that the game in particular is an FMV game with How Long to Beat stating it has around 16 hours of quote-unquote gameplay. So large download sizes for the sake of resolution makes sense. Let's get into it though. Alright, delving into specific games such as Immortality, it didn't work at all originally. I loaded it, downloaded the game files it wanted, which were about 3 or 4 gigabytes, and then after I tried to start the game, what seemed to be a really long tutorial, it wouldn't let me play any of the videos after that. This problem isn't unique to me, however. It seems, judging by reviews, a lot of the games have this problem, particularly Immortality, as I said, where people can't get past the tutorial of the game, and it isn't they're messing it up. Trust me, it's actually, messed up. To be fair, Netflix, I'm not 100% sure they're the ones in charge of the port, particularly, or if it's the studio themselves, but for a game which won a Golden Joystick and Tribeca Award, it's getting a 3.0 out of 5.0 stars, kinda bad. The Steam version has around 70% rating though, but that's due to people not liking the game's story, versus the actual ability to play the game. Now, I re-downloaded it and it seemed to fix it, but that isn't a good impression on the initial download if that is a common problem, so much so that most of the reviews point at that. It's something that needs to be addressed, and for a service like Netflix, I'm honestly surprised there aren't more FMV-style games in their library, since, They're quite literally movie video games. I'm not a fan of Immortality, though. Don't get me wrong, I get the story is apparently phenomenal. I'd highly recommend a video by Jacob Geller. I recommend most videos he produces. I wasn't sold on the game, though. I like games with strong hooks, and I like to be hooked early on, preferably while I have a lot of games to play, and I love games, so time is a big factor for me, as my library is at least 1,000 long. I've also got Game Pass, and way too many itch.io games. Oh, and PS5 and Switch, and it's a headache. So, I wasn't enthralled with Immortality. I found myself looking for the point and didn't feel a pull at all. I saw a couple of the more special scenes, shall we say, of the game, but I felt like the game never really hooked me. I'm sure the game is great, but it's just a personal taste. Most of my problem with the game is the bug it had coming in, though. Next is Before Your Eyes, a game I actually adore due to its story and concept. I've streamed it in the past, but the game, for all its merit, isn't really done well for those with glasses such as myself. To explain the rest of my issues, here's the premise of the game. You blink, the story moves on, even if you aren't ready for it. So it's always best to make sure your eyes aren't horribly dry. Cool premise, right? Problem comes in, however, when you're playing the game and it doesn't register your blinking properly and skips the story whenever you haven't blinked, and then you're stuck halfway through a blink and you're like, I can't blink. And then the problems only are exacerbated whenever I try to recalibrate the game and it registered extra blinks. And then there's an option to say, hey, you're registering more blinks than what you should be, and the recalibration after hitting that setting did nothing. There is a fix on PC for this, however, with you having the ability to click and essentially play honestly, like whenever you blink, you continue the story. It doesn't work with the phone, though. Its problem merges with the inseparable touchscreen, with both progress and movement of the game being tied to it, so a touch that you intended as movement to the game can be interpreted as a continuation of the scene, and it's a pain in my opinion. There's an option to use motion controls, but if you want to play in public, I think it'd be embarrassing just to swing your screen around, and it's also a fault of the game either way. The game is great. I'd recommend playing the PC version just cause caution if you have glasses, you know? The next 3 games don't have the overt problems that the first 2 had, so there's not as much to say about them. Into the Breach, a game that I'm not good at, but it's fun. The game is super strategic and really great. I've really got to say, out of the games on this list, this is the one that encapsulates the best type of app game to me. Simple to get into, difficult to master. It doesn't ask the work for you to learn 50 different stats, but instead asks you to keep in mind the best strategies. It's a shockingly difficult game despite the simplicity. I find that it's strategically in-depth, and it functions as a good app, and that's about it. There's no complaints there. Then there's Reigns 3 Kingdoms, a game which boasts the largest amount of dialogue and gameplay of a Reigns game. It's more or less the original Reigns game. I played the first one whenever I was a kid about 6 or 7 years ago. It's not adding much, in my opinion. It adds a little, the backdrop of course being the Three Kingdoms period in China, and its Assassin's Creed Mind-esque hopping plot. It's a fine app to work to pass the time and such, but not much of a game in my opinion. For a gaming service, no dig at the game. If I was more into either Three Kingdoms period or the Reigns game series, I'm sure it'd be a better experience, but it works great for longer lasting gameplay if you're into that. Then, so I'd like to amend my earlier list, and instead of Kentucky Route Zero, we'll be looking into Terra Nil. This was the first time I had a happy reaction as something going up on the Netflix games list, and is the first I've seen advertised that it's playable on Netflix service, though. It's a mixed bag of emotions in this regard. Terra Nil was a game I have on my wishlist on Steam, and I'm always excited when something on my wishlist is handed to me at effectively no extra cost. It's the best way to describe the feeling is that I found myself ecstatic that the game was coming to Game Pass and wouldn't have to pay, albeit I pay for the subscription itself. this is another one of those situations, as I find the game fascinating, but man, am I glad I didn't put $25 down for it. It looks like an app game in the, trailer, and, well, turns out it is an app game. It's okay in definition. It's basically not worth the $25 again, but the game feels surface level at best, with yes, the nice messaging of environmental reclamation and whatnot, but it's just bland with not much of a variety in my opinion. Also, for a strategy game, it's super basic, and the only puzzle I kinda have to solve are the problems given to me by the mechanics of the game. Something that felt really bad in its second level when it introduces this rail system, which needs 3 other buildings to feel even semi-useful, but is required to progress. Also, despite the 3 stages process to level, it feels that not having access to all 3 stages at the start hurts the strategy element, since introducing animals back to the ecosystem is tied to the terrain you adapted in stage 1 and 2. I adapt them to clear phase 2, but 3 needs certain environments made, so I feel that not knowing it hurts the strategy element, if that makes sense. I don't think the game's quality is any fault of Netflix again, and I think the opportunity just to play games even if they're not that good, a la Game Pass and Redfall recently, thankfully I didn't spend a cent beyond my subscription, because personally this isn't worth, again, $25. With all 5 games covered and how they play, let's then encapsulate my overall feelings about Netflix gaming service. It's alright. Not that great again, not that bad. There's a lot of improvements that should be made, and if it's any hope of succeeding. They could actually launch a Game Pass alternative though, and do it quite well. Just spin it off as much as it's a nice benefit that you get the games alongside your Netflix subscription. If you want more profits, it needs to be its own entity in my opinion. A net player or net games, I don't know what you call it, but charge something reasonable, give a discount to people who pay for both services, and voila. Secondly, create a PC version. Yes, people play apps, but apps aren't the predominant gaming market for people who want to buy a service like Game Pass. Now, there are reports that they're ramping up production on games as they're acquired 3 other gaming studios as well as creating its own studio. They're also supposedly getting to work on getting the service onto more platforms, and if that's the case, that obviously would solve my problem with it not having PC versions of the games. So it's good to see Netflix is pretty devoted to getting into gaming despite only 1% of its current audience actually using said service. A lot of the articles I'm reading also compare the cloud gaming push from Netflix akin to Stadia, but I'd also disagree there. Stadia's major problem, at least from my perspective, is the need for a console and treating it like a console instead of a library of games. A good mix of it, like, again, the Xbox app, which lets you buy games from its store, but also has a fantastic library, obviously works better. Now, not only is the future looking bright for getting the home console experience for the service, but they're venturing into the AAA landscape alongside Chaco Sony, who was a former lead on Overwatch, who's heading up a new studio for Netflix, and another being Marco Lastica, a former exec from Zynga, who I'm not as excited for. He seems to be working on more of the mobile side of games. And while unknown which team he's getting into, Joseph Staten, who worked with Bungie and on Sunset Overdrive and Halo Infinite as of recently, none of the studios have names as far as I can tell. I'm also kind of crossing my fingers if they're really looking to do cloud gaming, seeing as if they're going to take on or buy some of the IPs that were developed via Stadia, but weren't quite finished. The development of the games also paints an interesting idea of a trifecta of development, as Netflix could then make games, develop an adaptation for film for the games, and of course then produce merch for said games and film. The future could be big for this part of Netflix, if it plays its cards right. Again, it's not great yet, but I mean, they could transform it quite easily.